Welcome, travelers! Today, I'm bringing you custom-made magic cards featuring Slay the Princess. I've been love-struck by the game and felt really inspired by its design. I wanted to make a full set dedicated to it. If you haven't already played it, now that the pristine card is out, there's no better time to. I recommend it wholeheartedly. Needless to say, you'll find spoilers here, so make sure you already have enjoyed the game fully before continuing on. Unlike my usual one card and deck building ideas around it, this time I'll go with a different approach, focused on cards themselves, since I'm bringing you a ton of them and I don't want to linger too much on synergies, or we'll stay here for like 3 hours or so. All cards are made with the idea of leading the commander deck, and I'm not going to just throw them at your face, but I'll explain why I put them together the way they are. So let's get into the meat of the video. Starting with our boy, the Long Quiet. For a 3-9 Azorius, the Long Quiet is a 3/3 legendary creature god hero. On enters, he creates the Pristine Blade, a legendary equipment token that lets the equipped creature fight. Whenever he dies, he exiles himself with 2 counters and becomes suspended. Also, whenever a creature dies, you get to investigate. Lastly, he partners and melds with the princess. So, the Long Quiet is in Azorius colors because I based him on the voice of the hero, who wants to protect the world and cares about others, but also is inquisitive and questions the narrator on every turn. He comes in with the Pristine Blade, and like in the game, he doesn't have to pick it up. And it looks pretty unappealing too, since it's just a 3/3. Fighting doesn't seem relevant, but we'll see later why he might want to use its implement. He will need it if he wants to make this right. The Suspend I used to represent his ability to always come back after death, and to add the flavor of time still going on while he's dead, as the world changes even when we don't see it do that. The Investigate every time a creature dies I think is perfect to represent the clues you gather during the endless cycles of violence you have to go through. For deck building, the usual clue synergies are never gonna be bad. Also, Doctor Who cards of all things have good synergies both with Suspend and Investigate, so if you dig those, they should fit right in. Now, let's take a look at the Princess. For 1 and Simic, she's a 1/1 legendary creature human noble, with, at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player chooses 1, either put a +1/+1 counter on a creature of yours and of his, or you each investigate. Also, whenever she's targeted by the Long Quiet with the Pristine Blade, they are melded into the Princess and the Dragon. Of course, she partners with the Long Quiet. Now, technically, she doesn't have to be targeted with the Long Quiet while he holds the Pristine Blade. If you manage to give the Long Quiet a different activated ability that can target your own creatures, that would still make them meld, but it's so complicated that I haven't mentioned it. I made her Simic because that's the color combination that represents adaptability, mutation, and evolution. She changes because it's in her nature. There's no ill intent or greater purpose behind it. The only thing she wants is freedom. I made her a 1/1 because she starts harmless, but the more you doubt, the more she grows. Hence the +1/+1 counters keep adding on. As the alternative, you can work with her to try and understand why she's stuck in the cabin and how to free her, hence investigate. So your deck gets even more investigation synergies and the usual Simic +1/+1 counter shenanigans you can build around if you want. But you aren't hardly pushed in any direction with this pair. When the Princess melds with the Long Quiet, what you get is the Princess and the Dragon. A 4/6 legendary creature god noble with double strike, menace, vigilance, and it says abilities you activate cost 1 less to activate, double your draws, and half the damage you take. The flavor isn't subtle on this one. The Princess and the Dragon is 2 in 1, so it has double strike, must be blocked by 2 creatures in a 1, it has twice as many options and takes twice the damage to be taken down. Now, the Princess and the Long Quiet are 1, reaping conclusion from clues is a lot easier, allowing you to crack them for just 1 mana. You can build around this first ability a lot. It also goes infinite with Basalt Monolith if you're into that lame stuff. That said, we can't linger too much on the specifics. Let's dive onto the second commander. For 8 and a red, the Adversary is a 6/6 legendary creature demon with Trample. It costs X less to cast her. X is the greatest power among creatures on the battlefield, and whenever it enters or attacks, it fights. Also, whenever she gets mad, you get to Impulse Draw. The Adversary is a much simpler and frankly safe design. I made her straight red because she acts on impulse. She's big, strong, aggressive, and wants to combat. The better the challenge, the easier she will come down. Notice that she has to fight. So if your opponents control no creatures, or they only have creatures you don't want to fight, too bad, you'll have to fight anyway. And if the Adversary somehow ends up being the only creature on the battlefield, she will have to fight herself. That said, the Adversary only pushes you into including high-power creatures. Everything else she does is board control and card advantage, allowing for full deck building freedom and a reliable commander that will always be fairly affordable to play. While not groundbreaking, I think that her design will always be fun to play with. The Eye of the Needle is a natural transition to the Adversary. Let's see what she has to offer. For 3 and grow, she's a 5/5 legendary creature demon with Trample and Cascade, and reads whenever a player casts a spell or activates an ability at instant speed, they get punched in the face. Also, all your creatures must attack if able and must be blocked if able. The Eye of the Needle is total savagery. She comes in kicking with cascades and responds to anything that isn't honest main-phase gameplay with brutality. Note that she will hit you too if you try something sneaky behind her back, so don't build around Cascade because once she's on the battlefield, that will trigger this ability. I made her smaller than the Adversary because even though she's technically bigger, she's weakened by her savagery. She cares no longer for a fair and engaging fight, she's only looking to crush you, and you can actually beat the Eye of the Needle in combat unlike the Adversary, unless the Adversary herself allows you to. With the Eye of the Needle as your commander, you make a statement. You are here to turn big scary creatures sideways. Use this to your advantage by running cards that benefit from being blocked, untapping your opponent creatures, or disable blocking for center targets to handcraft your ideal combat phase. Now, on something less violent, the Damsel is a legendary creature human noble. For a white, she's a 1/1, and it makes a creature smitten every turn. Smitten is a new role that gives +1/+1. Ward 1 forces a creature to attack and stops it from attacking you. Also, when the Damsel leaves the battlefield, each smitten creature is sacrificed. Now, if she were released as it is, she would probably need to be banned in Legacy, because a 1-drop creature that essentially removes a creature every turn in 60-card Magic would be absolutely unfair. In multiplayer though, especially in a format like Commander where most creatures are run for their abilities than their smacking power, I think it's fine. The Damsel is obviously white because she only wants to make you happy, as selfless as one may be. Her purity, though, has the side effect of making those smitten by it overcommitted. Her second ability will make it so that players controlling smitten creatures are inclined to keep her around, in order to not lose their creatures, making the Damsel a fairly unique political tool for Commander. Note that the smitten role are enchantments, so you could build around Constellation, and her second ability triggers on leaving the battlefield, so you could use her as removal if you run flicker effects. After the Damsel, we go to the Happily Ever After. I know that technically it's simply Happily Ever After. I added the for 2 reasons. One, it's really just this one that doesn't have it, which breaks the theme and bothers me. Second, Happily Ever After is already a card, so I had to use a different name for that reason too. Aside, it's a legendary creature human noble for 1 and Boros. It's a 1/1 with Soul Bond and reads, pair creature you control have Shroud, Enlist, and whenever they attack while enlisting a pair creature, draw a card. For those who don't know, Soul Bond is a real mechanic that pairs 2 creatures you control, both when the Soul Bond creature enters, or when another one does, if you so wish. Unlike usual Soul Bond creatures, the Happily Ever After gives all paired creatures this additional ability, not just the one she's paired with. which is kind of fun if you want to put as many soulbound creatures you can in your deck. Enlist is a keyword that essentially allows you to attack with 2 creatures as they were 1. So what the Happily Ever After does is rewarding you for paying creatures by giving them protection from influence, both yours and your opponents, as their bond must remain pure, and giving you card advantage for overcoming obstacles together. The Happily Ever After also has an adventure. It's an instant for 2 and is it, and asks you to discard 4 cards as an additional cost, but draw 6 and deal 6 to a target. Obviously a reference to the 4 torches you need to snuff out in order to truly be happy with the princess. It's hard to do since you have to let go your comfort zone and venture into a new reality, ditching a card per torch, but getting rewarded with an almost full grip and the ability to punch whatever was holding you back along the way. But what if things go wrong? For 3 double red and a white, the Burning Grey is a 4/4 legendary creature spirit with flying, vigilance, lifelink, and if you have Delirium, you get to cast up to a card of each type from your graveyard for free. But when the Burning Grey dies, you lose your graveyard. Before breaking it down, let's go to the Drowned Grey, the second phase of this modal card. It's a 1/1 legendary creature spirit for Dimir with flying and menace. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws, discards, and loses a life. And when it attacks, if you have Delirium, it makes each player sacrifice a creature, and then makes each opponent lose life equal to the number of different card types in your graveyard. I designed this card to work together in tandem. The terrible Drowned Grey hates you as much as it hates your opponent, forcing all to go through her cycle, but hurting them way more once you reach Delirium. She could finish the game by herself without ever needing the other side, but it has obvious synergy with it. It even allows you to sacrifice herself to bring the Burnt Grey out if you so wish. Where the Drowned Grey is a slow and steady painful killer, the Burnt Grey is unbridled passion. She comes in with a bang, puts all her into it, and if it doesn't work, the graveyard you steadily filled is wiped along with her. You could build your deck with a glass cannon style gameplay with Turbo Mill and ignoring the Drowned Grey completely, to get it to Delirium as fast as possible to take advantage of the Burning Grey explosive potential. Having the option to wing it based on your draws is my favorite way to look at it. On to more friendly undeads, let's go check what the Specter is cooking. For Azorius, she's a 1/1 legendary creature spirit with flying, and as at the beginning of each player's turn, you can have one spirit creature become an aura enchanting a creature of the player's whose turn it is. If you do it, it makes it so it can't be sacrificed or attack you, and also rewards both you and the creature's controller with life gain and card draw. This is probably the weirdest one I made of the bunch. The Specter is a friendly possession style spirit. It's political and doesn't force your opponent to interact with her abilities. But if they don't want to cooperate, you may still possess your own creatures to get this with card draw and life gain. The best way to make fuel for the Specter is earning a bunch of cards that create spirit tokens. It fits naturally into a spirit tribal deck, but be careful to not entrust your opponents with your most powerful creatures, as they may decide to crush them into blockers if you're uncareful. Let's hop now to a less friendly kind of possession. The Wraith is a legendary creature Wraith for 2 and double black. It's a 1/1 with Delve and Shadow, and whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent, you may sacrifice it to steal a creature from the defending player. If you use the stolen creature to deal damage to its owner, you get to exile a card from the hand and cast it without paying its mana cost. Then, you mill 3 and sacrifice the creature you just stole. The Wraith cares not for you or what you want, and only sees the Long Quiet as a vehicle to escape the cabin, making it the blackest card in the set. With Delve, the Wraith is able to re-enter the battlefield even after it possesses creatures again and again, and anytime she delivers the creatures onto its maker, you get a huge boost before leaving it a corpse. Sometimes the creature you steal may be so valuable that you don't want to attack their owner with it, so that you can keep them. It creates an interesting balance to disincentivize hurting the owner of the cards you steal if those are particularly impactful. Onto the last ghostly incarnation of the princess, The Nightmare is a legendary creature nightmare for black. It's a 1/1, a sphere and death touch. And at the beginning of each player's upkeep, the player loses 2 life. And when it attacks, each player may tap a creature and stun them. If they don't, they lose a life for each permanent they control. The Nightmare is very impactful for just 1 mana, but her nature of having fun by causing pain and fear is balanced by being entirely symmetrical. I'm not sure if she would be too strong in Legacy due to 40 life not being the same as 20, but I don't think it matters. Her second ability reads funny at first glance, but the flavor is having a creature busy chanting
heart, lungs, liver, nerves, heart, lungs, liver, nerves, heart, lungs, liver, nerves,
to prevent a massive life loss from her getting close to you. A simple design that will add much needed speed to casual Commander games. The Moment of Clarity is her second form. For Mardu is a 3/3 legendary creature avatar. You can tap it to gift her to your opponent. If you do, you draw 2 cards, reveal your hand to that player, and get an experience counter. Your opponents may do this too, but you will always be the one to accrue experience. When the Moment of Clarity dies, you and another player of your choice may put a permanent with mana value equal or lower to the amount of experience you have onto the battlefield. Completely different from its predecessor, the Moment of Clarity relies on thrust. Her mask breaks, showing the emptiness within. Revealing your hand and intention to an opponent is an act that may or may not be repaid in kind, culminating into forming a strong bond on the table or breaking it in fear, depending on what is shown. It's both a selfish and brave emotional act to open up, and its kindness to allow another to do the same. Back to a more instinct-driven princess, the Beast is a 5/5 legendary creature beast with menace and trample for 5 mana. As an additional cost to cast it, you may sacrifice a creature to get a mana discount equal to the sacrificed creature power. Whenever a beast you control deals combat damage, you get to draw a card and untap a cave. On top of that, caves you control get the ability to give your beasts hexproof. The beast form is pure instinct and power. Devouring makes it cheaper, fetching praise gives you option, and hiding in its lair grants it protection. A simple design that opens up a reason to run a bunch of caves and a bunch of beasts in your commander decks. It doesn't have an open-ended scope as much as the other princesses, but has a particular niche that hasn't been filled yet while fitting the vibe of its form. It grows into the Den, a 6/6 legendary creature beast with vigilance for 4 and double green. When it attacks or blocks, it gains indestructible until end of combat, and then returns 2 cards from different graveyards to their own hands. It also gives you the ability to sacrifice another creature to gain life and put a +1/+1 counter on it. The Den can fight forever, relying on its regeneration, and aims to feed for survival and dominance. Its bestial nature, though, doesn't care to survive above all else. It isn't that selfish. With its first ability, you can make a friend by gaining resources yourself. When shown kindness, the Den is willing to save you in the battle, and that's reflected in her regrowth ability. Remaining into the wide side of the princess, the Witch for 2 and Golgari is a 2/2 legendary creature cat druid with first strike, vigilance, and she reads, creature must attack each combat if able, and whenever the Witch deals combat damage to a player, you get 2 mana that doesn't fade as phases end. Plus, whenever you're attacked, you draw a card. The Witch is the result of backstabbing and betrayal. She's always on the lookout for attacks and tries to be the first one to bite, even if it ultimately such an attack dooms her. The Witch's nature makes all wary and paranoid, forcing attacks. She gets to accrue mana and draw cards anytime what she envisions would happen, happens. If you try to stay away from this mug princess, the next time you encounter her, she will look like this. For Selesnya, the Wild is a 0/1 legendary creature avatar. It has Bestow for 3 and triple white, giving enchanted creature power and toughness equal to your life total. She also has, whenever a basic land enters under your control, gain 2 life. The more her influence grows, the more powerful you will be with the Wild once united. As the head of a life gain deck, her abilities read simple, but give you a reliable way to trigger it with ease and multiple times in a turn potentially, all paired with win condition that's not super simple to pull off. The creature united with the wild will be as strong as life itself. But what happens if you try really hard to change the witch's point of view? The Thorn is a 4/4 legendary creature human druid for Naya. Whenever you're dealt or deal damage to an opponent, gain grief counter. Every turn you lose 4 life for every 10 grief counters you have. For example, if you got 7 grief counters, you lose no life. If you have 22 grief counters, you lose 8. You can also tap the Thorn to get rid of all grief. And if you removed at least 30 this way, you get an emblem with you can't get grief counters and creatures you control have +3/+3 and lifelink. The story the Thorn tells is one of pain and endurance, but also of forgiveness and finding happiness again. Enduring pain and hurting people ultimately does nothing good for you, eating at your life in bigger and bigger chunks. It's only when you're able to forgo the grief that you get rewarded. You and those around you perceive the aura of genuine love you carry and are forever empowered by it. Even once you are there no longer, their memory of you endures and still inspires them. But away from the philosophy of the Thorn, and let's go into some wacky fun. The Stranger for a generic mana gives you a legendary creature Shapeshifter. It's a 1/1 with Changeling that's all colors and reads, lands are every basic land type, and if anything refers to a library, choose a random player's library for it. It's weird to read, but what it means is that whenever you would draw 1 or more cards or search for a card, you have to randomly pick a library as you do. Meaning, you have a 75% chance in a 4-player game to not draw or search a card from your own deck. Aside from obliterating combo decks, the Stranger is meant to have a mean game once in a while. Unlike house decks though, the Stranger doesn't cheat mana, change how cards function, nor rearranges control of permanence. I like this better because it still makes for meaningful games while completely reshaping how the game is played, giving all participants access to a random bunch of cards to toy with. The Razor is up next. For Rakdos, it's a 2/2 legendary artifact creature construct with Death Touch, First Strike, and Haste, and must attack each combat if able. Regenerate each creature blocking the Razor, and whenever it deals combat damage, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. She then transforms if she has 10 or more power. The Heart of Blades, which is an official name because it's technically still called the Razor, no longer gets countered and doesn't regenerate blocking creatures. But anytime it attacks, it slices each opponent's life total. Reckless Aggression is the name of the game here. The Razor, despite looking very threatening, it's easy to keep at bay, due to the fact that the creatures that get eviscerated by her blades return where they were to be skewered again. But it's only a matter of time before she transforms, and starts to really cut down life totals to size. Extra combat steps are your best friends when looking to ramp up the massacre with the Razor. Caged, but not harmless. For a green, the Prisoner is a 3/3 legendary creature human noble with Defender. When it dies, you get her head as an equipment, with whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to an opponent, gain 7 life, draw 4 cards, untap all lands, and exile this, and it equips for 3. The Prisoner yearns for freedom. Defender had been locked up in the cabin, mean that she can't get there by herself. Even then, she will do everything in her power to get out of prison, even self-beheading. If you manage to pick up her head and bring it home, she will reward you with life, cards, and mana. I made her green because she does act directly and on instinct, but is very cold and without the fiery passion of red. The Prisoner is basically a cornered animal. I could be persuaded into adding blue for the sound of the other plan, but I just feel like green fits very well. On an entirely different note, the cage appears in the pristine cut if you fail to pick up her head. For 4 and Orzhov, she's a 4/7 legendary creature zombie with affinity for artifacts. Whenever you cast a creature spell, create a zombie copy of that. Other non-token creatures you control are colorless artifacts with no abilities, and you can pay 1, double, white, and tap it to make another creature a colorless artifact until the cage leaves. This is one of my most ambitious designs, maybe the most ambitious designs of the bunch. The cage represents the princess, enslaved by fear, locked into a never-ending, unbreakable cycle. Her body works without the need of her head. Thus, creatures you play are split into zombie bodies and caged heads. The extra wording serves to avoid getting a double enter the battlefield trigger, as that would make the card too powerful, especially if you run token multiplier effects. Building the cage can be very fun. It essentially makes all your creatures both tokens and zombies, and gives you a bunch of artifacts. It has tribal synergies and artifact synergies going on, allowing for a very unique deck to come together. The Tower, for Orzhov, is a 4/4 legendary creature demigod with Defender, Ward 4 and Eminence. For as long as he's either in your command zone or battlefield, whenever you cast a spell, you lose 2 life. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 3 life for each of them, and she transforms if your devotion is 10 or higher. Being loyal to the Tower is a jarring experience. I knew I wanted to use Eminence for her, but I wasn't sure how to make it fair. Then it hit me. No one ever said Eminence has to be an upside. To wield the tremendous power of the Tower, you have to be ready to pay dearly. Her protection is good, and she's hard to kill, even while shackled. You could also cheat her. If you sacrifice the Tower and then reanimate her only later when she can transform, Eminence won't work from the graveyard. That is a lot of work just to run a wall as your commander, but if you manage to reach that devotion while under her, you are rewarded with the Apotheosis, which is a legendary planeswalker with 10 loyalty, Ward 4, and stops creatures from attacking you or her unless their controller pays 3 mana and life. For 0, she drains each opponent for your devotion. For +4, she cheats any spell, and for -4, she tutors thrice. Note that after she transforms, Eminence is gone, allowing you to cast spells more freely. But she transforms at the end of your turn, meaning you won't get a single activation until a world turn cycle, allowing your opponents to team up to bring her down. She's tough, but definitely not invulnerable. Make sure your defenses are up, because losing her early after all the work you have to put into bringing her into life is really rough. If you defy your goddess to the end, she will change into the Fury, a 7/7 legendary creature horror for 4 and John with Trample, Annihilator 2, protection from white and blue, and at the beginning of your upkeep, lose 3 life. For as long as she's in play, you can gain life or sacrifice permanents, and when it enters or attacks, it deals 2 damage to each opponent for each other creature you control, then destroys them. When the Fury dies, you turn up to 3 other cards from your graveyard to your hand. The Fury is an unstoppable force that will inevitably squelch every obstacle, and won't listen to reason for as long as it stays alive. She will erode you as well, while preventing healing, and stopping sacrifices is a form of protection for it, but is also a way to make it harder for you to get rid of her if your life total becomes too low. Fury works with none, and will crush all other creatures you put down next to her. But once the rage is tamed, you can then recollect yourself from the ashes it left in its wake and start to heal back. When having her leading a deck, keep the possibility to destroy her yourself available. While hard, if your opponent finds a way to make her unable to attack while not taking away her abilities, you will keep taking damage and taking damage from her with no upside. It has a weird synergy with indestructible creatures, since they will stay on the battlefield regardless of how many times the Fury will try to destroy them, and each time she will deal damage based on how many they are, not how many they are destroyed. So running some could be a funny idea. Also, you can't gain life, but preventing damage is still on the table. Fog effects might be more valuable here than somewhere else as a way to keep your life total from dwindling too fast. And with the last of the vessels done, we come to the Shifting Mound. For Wolberg, it's a 9/9 legendary enchantment creature god with indestructible, and at the beginning of your end step, exile up to 1 card from a graveyard and put a vessel counter on it. The Shifting Mound isn't a creature until there are 5 or more vessel counters in exile or battlefield. When the Shifting Mound becomes a creature, each player sacrifices all other non-land permanents and you put any number of permanents from exile with a vessel counter on them into play. They keep those counters. As the god of change, time will grind all to dust, but the Shifting Mound will keep everything she's seen in her memory and is able to manifest it with no effort once complete. Note that the Shifting Mound becomes a creature only if she previously wasn't. This means that if when she enters the battlefield, already 5 or more permanents have vessel counters on them, that trigger won't happen. No sacrifice, no putting stuff into play, until the end of the game if those are exiled. Unless you run a card that interacts with exile, and you should, since if an opponent manages to remove her in response of you targeting the 5th card to exile from a graveyard, for the rest of the game the Shifting Mound will be essentially be locked as a creature, unable to access her special trigger, unless you work around it by making it become something that isn't a creature and then a creature again through other means. It's possible, but really difficult. And with the Shifting Mound done, this should be the end of the video. But I couldn't close my love letter to Slade Princess without including one last bonus card. The Narrator is a legendary enchantment for Dimir. It can be your commander, like needed since he isn't a creature, and when it enters, or when a permanent with a bounty counter leaves, tap target non-land permanent. It loses all abilities until the beginning of your next turn, then you put a bounty counter on it if there wasn't one in play already. Whenever a permanent with a bounty counter leaves, each player draws a card. You can also pay that blue and tap it to go 2 creatures. The Narrator is just a reflection, hence an enhancement. His first ability wants to be him locking the princess in the cabin, taking away her power and promising a great reward for slaying her. But his ability to shut her out is only partial, which is why it only lasts until your turn comes around. His god is very on the nose, making the long quiet pick a fight with the princess at every turn. Note that this bounty counter ability isn't a May ability, so if you play something like Cyclonic Rift or through some other way you're the only one left with no land permanents on the battlefield, you have to put a bounty on your own permanents. Possibly, even the Narrator itself could have to be locked in the cabin at some point. When building a Narrator deck, I will prioritize cards that bounce non-land permanents. They will trigger easy bounties by replacing themselves. But be careful on going too crazy on meaningless bounty hunting, because for each card you draw, each opponent will too. You want to be cunning in picking only fights you can win without drawing too much attention to yourself. After all, there isn't a mirror.
There's definitely a mirror. There isn't.
Now, it truly is over. Thank you all for sticking up to this point, and let me know in the comments which one was your favorite and why. I took many hours to design these cards and was very happy to be able to show them here. Subscribe if you want to see more, and have a good day.